Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Peach Pundit, the podcast. It's a very special edition tonight because Christmas Day has come and gone. Election Day has come and gone. It's the opposite of Christmas Day, really.
Christmas Day for political nerds, maybe.
Yeah, my name is Scott Turner. I am the editor-in-chief, owner, publisher, Peach Pundit, and I'll be your host tonight. We don't know where Jason Pye is. He's turned off his phone. But I'm joined tonight
Can't blame him.
Can't blame him.
I'm still getting I still got fundraising texts today. I was like, what the heck? I thought those would be done.
The voice you hear there is the effervescent Buzz Brockway. Thank you for being with me tonight, Buzz, and not just like turning off your phone and playing the role of ostrich. Pie, wherever you are, hope you're okay. Now I'm worried about you. It's not right just to ghost your friends like this, but we hope Pie's okay.
Yep.
I'm sure he is. But like many Americans who woke up today, not the majority of Americans, but
Right.
many Americans woke up today probably feeling a little bit sad because we know that Jason is no fan of President-elect Donald Trump, which I believe that's the first time I've uttered that sentence
Yes.
this year anyway.
The once and future president.
The first felon to be elected as president of the United States.
Well, and there's a guy, if you follow Kite and Key Media, which produces some really cool little explainer videos on a whole host of things, one of the guys involved in that, Troy Senik, apparently has a few years ago wrote a book about Grover Cleveland, who was at that, until last night, the only president to win 2 terms non-consecutively. And so he followed a similar path that Trump did. And now, so Troy's promising a major updates to his book to sell it again. If you're interested in the life of Grover Cleveland and Donald Trump, who
how about a biographer catching lightning in a bottle at the right exact time?
I put it in my Audible queue. I want to learn more about Grover Cleveland. How did that happen?
I
lived through the Trump making it happen, but how did it happen in Grover Cleveland's era?
Yeah, I've made it through quite a few of the presidential biographies. My favorite, I think by far, is the Washington one, just because it goes so deeply into detail about every aspect of him, like how tall he was compared to other people at the time.
What book did you read of Washington's about Washington?
I think it was Chernow's Washington.
Okay.
Yeah,
I read a 2-volume one called All Cloudless Glory. Which was very good. Yeah, exhaustive because it's I don't know how many pages it was. Between the 2 volumes, it's numerous inches thick. So.
Yeah, they can get pretty massive, but we are indeed at a historical moment in America, and despite what the people who currently run the Georgia Republican Party might think, I'm not sad that Donald Trump won.
Right.
I'm not extraordinarily happy either. I really didn't feel like it mattered who won, because Donald Trump in his closing days had moderated to the point of what I felt like adopted several key policy positions of the left in an effort to win the election.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily blame him for that. He's doing what he had to do to win. That's what many candidates do.
Right.
But as a policy wonk who prides themselves on supporting traditional conservative viewpoints like free markets, free trade, lower taxes, lower spending, I didn't see a whole lot for me to get excited about in the whole policy arena.
Right.
And so I'm not sad, but I'm not happy either. It didn't really matter to me who won the presidency. Now, there were several down ballot races I was deeply invested in. I love my congressman. He was running against a coup. And I absolutely love Barry Loudermilk and happy to go to the polls and vote for him and several other. I didn't vote for any Democrats, not one.
Me either.
Including Republicans who present themselves currently as Republicans when I know they're actually Democrats. Didn't vote for them either. So I'm looking at you, local school board races, didn't vote for you. So just to be clear about who I'm talking about there, with several Democrats running as Republicans in my local school board races, I didn't vote for them either. But I voted for 0 Democrats, only Republicans got my vote, and I will stand by that till the end.
You rhino?
Right. Exactly.
Quote, Republican in quotes. Right.
So you and I, when we talked last, we were sort of doing this prediction thing.
Yeah.
And you and I thought Trump would win Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't so sure about the rest of it. And how are you feeling about it the day after?
Well, it's funny. I went back and forth, and a Google group I'm in of policy folks and others had a prediction contest, and I kind of looked at the stuff, and I went to 270 to win and made my own little map, and I thought that in the end Harris would win because in the last few days it seemed like that she had all sorts of momentum. I guess really since that Iowa poll came out that showed her, stunningly ahead in Iowa.
Let's talk about that. Just to clarify.
So I guess to wrap it up, I predicted 270 to 268 is what I thought. I thought Harris would win narrowly. That kind of late-breaking people in the key states would go to Harris, and boy, I was wrong.
Because we had this really like late-breaking poll in Iowa that showed Harris within the margin of error in Iowa, and
but ahead, which nobody had on their bingo card. Trump losing Iowa, right?
Well, that's exactly right. And that was when it came out, my immediate reaction to it was this has to be an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, outliers, statistically speaking, are they're aberrations.
Right.
They can't.
Every pollster has them, right? And she's a well-respected pollster who has nailed it in the last number of years. And she focuses only on Iowa, right? So she had pretty accurately predicted what the margin in Iowa would be for quite some time.
So it's a Seltzer poll. Harris 47, Trump at 44. And my immediate reaction upon seeing that was no way. No way. Right. That has to be an outlier. And there were several Iowa House seats that were currently held by Republicans. They ended up being toss-ups. And as well in other polling, not just this one. And I think Trump won by like 9 points in Iowa.
50. I'm looking at it right now on Decision Desk HQ. 55.9 to 42.7. So a 13.2 points.
Yeah.
That poll's an outlier.
that poll was an outlier. So
but it sort of kicked off all this sort of talk in the last couple of days that Harris had momentum. And Nate, it was Tuesday morning, I guess. I get the email from Nate Silver, his Silver Bulletin Substack. The dude runs 80,000 simulations. Harris won 40,012 of them, or something like that. So he's like, I have no idea. I have no idea what's going to happen.
He ran 80,000, and it was like Donald Trump won 40,003 or something.
Yes. So he's like, I don't know what's going to happen today.
I mean, at least he was honest about it.
Right.
They're usually pretty arrogant, saying, oh, listen to my forecast because I'm the one that's always accurate. And he's saying, heck if I know. And then last night, I've been sleeping on News Nation, man.
Yeah, this is an interesting channel, Yeah,
it is. I got to meet Chris Steyerwalt, who's one of their head guys over there. And Steyerwalt wrote a book that I really like. It's about how the media intentionally outrages you to keep you engaged.
Sure.
And as we're watching the night, they were using Decision Desk HQ for their projections. And they were calling states faster than any other network and sometimes by hours. At a certain point, they called Georgia, and they called Georgia fairly early.
Right.
And compared to the other channels, I had Fox on my phone, I had CNN on my laptop, and I had News Nation on the main screen in the television in the living room television set. And they were calling it like rapidly compared to others, and they were getting it right. Yeah, and they had the win probability thing, sort of like we do with baseball scores later in the innings. What's the win probability of this team? If
New York Times had their like dial,
right?
So,
right,
yeah. No, I've followed decision tests for a long time because they get the data quickly and accurately, and it's interesting. And now with all these projections and so forth,
they call it
pretty accurately. Yeah.
And my wife is sitting next to me, and my wife pays attention at the big moments in politics. She's not a political nerd like I am. She doesn't pay attention to the minutia and the details on between elections. She tunes in for elections. She gets herself informed. She goes votes. But she noticed, why are they dragging this out at CNN? Why won't they go ahead and call? And at one point, there was a lady who was one of the folks participating between Jake Tapper and John King. And John King does the magic wall. He's he's analyzing county level. He really, and he has a great knowledge of various counties and how they've traditionally and historically voted. And they're doing the comparison of Harris versus Biden 4 years ago and Trump versus Trump 4 years ago. And they're showing how there's a 3-point swing basically everywhere, where Trump is doing better than he was before and Harris is underperforming Biden.
Yeah, that was all very interesting because it kind of gave you a sense as you're like watching Pennsylvania, for example, or how is she doing compared to Biden, and how is Trump doing compared to 4 years ago, and kind of gave you a sense, all right, what's really happening in this state.
Right. And at this particular moment, the lady says, I just got off the phone with Gabe Sterling, and he tells me that there are 100,000 votes outstanding. He expects them to go slightly for Harris based upon where they are in the state, but they feel confident that it can be wrapped up with the 100,000 votes that are outstanding. So they throw it back to Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper says, "Oh, hang on a second. Donald Trump has a 118,000 vote lead, and you're saying that there's 100,000 votes left over?" And he throws his palms in the air, like, why aren't we calling this? He didn't say that, but he's looking out into past the cameras to the producers and everybody's behind the camera, like, if there are only 100,000 votes left, and he's got 118,000 margin, why aren't we calling this?
Yeah.
And John King says, well, maybe Gabe meant, give or take a few. And the lady interjects and says, no, actually, according to state law, they have to know how many outstanding ballots there are. So the number is really 100,000.
Right. Yeah.
And which they throw it back, and Jake Tapper's looking behind the cameras, like, guys, why aren't we calling this?
Yeah, and knowing Gabe, he probably said it's 100,472 or whatever the exact number was.
Yeah, right. Because he wasn't about to say, he wasn't about to not be accurate.
Right. But I mean, you recall in 2020, that was something that really came back to bite Brad Raffensperger, because you all recall the morning after he stands up and he says, there's so many in this county and so many in that county, and blah blah blah, and Trump's lead is bigger than that, and there kept so that made it appear like, oh, there were all these other ballots just appearing out of nowhere. Well, no, that's because those were just guesstimates. I'm not accusing anybody of lying, but if and most of them were absentee ballots. Remember, we had a huge number in 2020. Right. So elections officials are saying, well, we got all these boxes over there. Looks like about 3,000. And it turned out to be 6,000, way off.
Yeah. So, because they hadn't opened them yet, because they had showed up before the polls closed on election day. They just hadn't been processed.
Right.
And that was a development under SB 202.
Exactly.
That allowed them to start processing the ballots beforehand. And then another part of the law that changed was that they had to report how many ballots they had outstanding by 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I forget which hour it is, but at a certain point they had to report how many ballots were
Right.
outstanding, so that they could not do
Yeah,
that
you don't
same
have
thing over again.
those kind of errors where you
Right.
think, all right, Trump,
Yep.
whoever is winning, but because there's only X ballots outstanding and there's more.
So my wife made this observation about CNN in particular, and it was like, I think they didn't call Georgia just to keep people watching, like to add some level of suspense, because once Trump won Georgia, it was basically over.
Mhm.
It was possible for Harris to win, but she would have had to sweep all the states
Yeah,
she ended up losing, like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. And,
right.
and at a certain point, it became obvious, like, wow, Trump might get the 300 electoral votes here.
Yeah.
And he still probably is going to get the 300.
Well,
But
no, if you look at decision desk
Mhm.
right now, looking at it right now, they have him at 301.
Right.
But the only state that's outstanding is Arizona, which he's up by 110,000 votes. But there's only 67% reporting, which is kind of astounding. At this 24 hours later, you're still only at. But nonetheless, yeah, he will be more than 300. He's at 301 right now.
Hmm. Well,
Because Wisconsin's 95% reporting, Trump with a 33,000 vote lead, so they've called that. Michigan, Trump with a 80,000 vote lead with 95% reporting, so they've called that for him. And of course, Pennsylvania, Trump with a 130,000 vote lead with 95% reporting. So, yeah, they were wise to call those.
so we're going to take a quick break for our live read, but I just want to let you know on the other side, we're going to talk about how the lawsuit that we were engaged in has impacted this election this year. But first, I want to thank our friends at Lee 6 Media and Robert Lee for donating his time as a Patreon to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, which is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization that's dedicated to providing veterinarian care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to golden and Labrador retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website at grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups. Thank you again to our friends at Lee 6 Media. If you too would like to be a patron, you can go head over to patreon.com/peachpundit and sign up for one of our tiers today. We'll add you to the list of people who rock and give you a shout out every week because we're so grateful to all those folks. So I have a message for Chairman Josh McCoon and the Georgia Republican Party. Are you ready, Buzz?
Yeah, lay it on me.
You're welcome. You're totally welcome. You fought me when I didn't want to fight you. You got engaged in this fight when it had nothing to do with you. It had to do with separation of powers and whether or not unelected people should be making new law. And it's something that Republicans should not be fighting against. You should not have been involved in a lawsuit. But there are no Democrats today in this state who are using those rules that could have
Right.
potentially delayed certification or caused havoc.
Right.
We didn't have any 80-year-olds with their eyes crossed after working 16 straight hours, hand counting ballots and getting a miscount and
Right.
causing controversy. We didn't have any of that chaos because we won that lawsuit. And to Chairman Josh McCoon and to the Georgia Republican Party and all the activists, and especially the people who sent me death threats, you're welcome. You're welcome. Because I guarantee you, had this been closer in any way whatsoever, and they would have definitely used those rules against Republicans.
Yes.
And if Trump's I was asked a couple weeks ago in a group setting, Scott, what is the best case scenario in your mind? And I said, regardless of who wins, the margin has to be huge.
Yeah.
It has to be orders of magnitude greater than 11,780.
Right.
Because we can't afford another close election where both sides start questioning the legitimacy of elections. So that was, and lo and behold, Trump wins by over 100,000 votes in Georgia.
Yes.
It's not even a question. It's not even a question. So good job to the Republicans for winning Georgia. Great job on winning Georgia.
And Scott, to build on that point about the margin, the states I just read to you, it's very good that the margin was as large as it was in all of those states. We don't have any, as we record now, 6 o'clock. Vice President Harris has conceded. She said the words "I concede." She called President-elect Trump personally to concede. So that's the way it's supposed to be. But it's I think a very good thing for our country that this was a decisive victory for whoever won, in this case, Donald Trump. So that's a good thing for our country.
Yeah. It makes it easier to move on. And I think it makes it easier for Kamala Harris to show grace.
Right.
Because if it was close, I would have expected her to try to fight.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I think, that I was worried about, aside from the threat and the scary nature of it, 30-something, over 30 bomb calls into precincts and 911 claiming there were bombs at precincts, at polling places.
Targeted to Democratic areas.
Yes, right.
To try to depress Democratic turnout.
Yeah.
So those polls had to remain open extra hours.
Right.
To accommodate the fact they got shut down and swept for bombs.
Right.
And they were completely bogus, and quickly identified that those were Russian nationals who were trying to impact and interfere with the election.
Right. But imagine if a margin was as it was in 2020, and it was, we were talking about a 12,000 vote margin, and that absolutely would have been an issue.
And then you would have had, if the SEB rules had been allowed to stand, you had DeKalb County saying, "Hang on, we had half a dozen bomb threats at our busiest precincts."
DeKalb and Fulton and Gwinnett.
Right. You don't think that they would have used that as justification to delay certification?
Absolutely.
I mean, they would have caused absolute chaos.
Right.
And how great was it that unelected people got put in their place? You're not allowed to expand the law.
Yes.
You're welcome. Anyway, you're welcome. But back to Kamala Harris, because I watched her speech. Did you get to watch her speech?
I did not. No.
I watched the entire thing. It's like less than 10 minutes long. The biggest line is, there are several things that stood out. First of all, the tone was conciliatory. It was hopeful. She talked about the importance of the issues that Democrats need to continue to fight for. I don't agree with any of those.
Right.
But she laid that out. She continued with a little bit of the us versus them rhetoric there. But there was a line that stood out. I'm going to read it to you. "We must accept the results of this election.
Yeah.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power."
Yeah.
Now, I've been really hard on both sides.
Yes.
I've been saying for a long time, I didn't expect there to be a concession from the loser. I think the margin is the only reason why we're not at this point.
Yeah.
But I was really, look, I don't give Democrats a ton of kudos all the time. But in this particular case, it's sort of like the bare minimum. But because the bare minimum behavior and social norms seems to have been discarded by both parties.
Right.
And before you jump on my case and say, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. Yeah, Stacey Abrams, Hillary Clinton, Stacey Abrams, Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
Right back at you.
Yes.
Both sides have been doing this. Dick Gephardt, Jimmy freaking Carter got involved in this 8 years ago when Trump won the first time. There was an impeachment of Donald Trump based upon a false narrative that ended up being a freaking nothing burger. There was no evidence of it, but they frothed up this public sentiment to make it harder for him to govern, that, call him an illegitimate president over and over and over again. So both sides have engaged in this type of behavior, but to see this at this particular moment, probably facilitated by the margin of victory, you can tell me what you think, but I was really glad that Kamala Harris decided to say those exact words.
Yes. We need, and it continued, we're not done with this process, but there needs to be a return to normalcy. And that's a big part of that is where the person who loses the election, Kamala Harris did not give up any of her rights to bring forward complaints about processes here, there, or hither or yon. She didn't give up her right to do that, but she did the right thing. And yeah, I'll say kudos to her. That was necessary.
Yeah, she went on to say a fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results.
Yes.
That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny, and anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States.
Yep. But look, she's 60 years old. These days, that's not old. I would think she's going to run again. We'll see if she's a major player, major candidate 4 years from now. But she'll be running to fill an open seat. So this 2028 rather is going to be wide open.
So while she conceded the election, she went on to say she doesn't concede the things that she fights for, which I'm okay with that. Go ahead.
Sure. Because
you know what? You just got rebuked. I mean,
yeah.
Why did Donald Trump win this election?
Well, here's my hot take. I was telling a friend this morning. I think there are a couple of things. Harris did nothing to distance herself from Joe Biden, and Joe Biden was an unpopular president. Joe Biden was heading for defeat, bigly. And
to use a word.
Yeah. And she did nothing to differentiate herself from that. She didn't do a very good job of articulating what she stood for. In reality, the only issue she really spoke passionately about, from my viewpoint, was abortion and how she wants to restore and protect abortion rights. And I think so that, and I think also we don't talk a lot on this podcast about wokeness and etc. But I think there were just a lot of folks, especially when you get to the Hispanic vote, which Trump got larger votes from Hispanics than Republicans have gotten in a long, long time. And I think a lot of that, the Hispanic population in America is pretty culturally conservative. And Harris didn't do anything to moderate her party's position on those issues at all. And so I think, that you had, in reality, she was one of the most left-wing candidates, perhaps the most left-wing nominee that America's seen, maybe since McGovern, maybe more than McGovern. But yes, she didn't do anything to moderate herself, didn't do anything to say, hey, disaffected Republicans, here's a way to go vote for me. I know there were Republicans for Harris. We happen to have a good friend who was one of their leading people. But I just think that, and so therefore Harris was saddled with all of the wokeness, and she was saddled with the economy, which, while the stock market may be thriving, grocery prices are sky high. She didn't really have any way to address those other than to say she's going to go after price gouging. That's it. Come on. And fuel costs are high. Those impact the middle class tremendously, and she had no plan to address any of that. So that's my hot take of why this was more about her than it was about Trump, because people's opinion, everybody in America has already made up their minds about Donald Trump.
And I know we don't talk about the woke stuff a lot here, mainly because I think you and I, we would tip the scales against Jason. He's a little bit more woke than we are, probably quite a bit more woke than we are. But the reality of it, though, was that men in this country specifically have been told for the last 10, 15, 20 years, everything we do is toxic.
Yes.
Toxic masculinity, mansplaining when we're just trying to be helpful. Our intentions are always questioned. And it's really rough when an entire political party makes a campaign out of those issues to say that and say, there's something in there for me. There's just nothing there. And so amongst Hispanic men, Trump got a majority of Hispanic
Yes.
men. And this is to the absolute dismay of the pundit class on mainstream media, CNN, even Fox. Like, how is he getting a majority of Hispanic men? And there is a certain cultural conservatism within the Hispanic community because they're faith-based, generally speaking. You know, there's still plenty of progressives that are Hispanics, but I think it goes back to the whole reason why people don't understand the phrase "Make America Great Again." It's a pushback on that type of rhetoric.
Yeah.
You know, when you're telling people that you are disproportionately influential in our community, therefore you have to be quiet now. That's not how our society should work. You know, that's not a meritocracy, which I think is something we should strive for in our country. People are rewarded for their ability and their creativity and their willingness to take risk and to make something. And they're being told, "No, you've had your chance. Let somebody else take the wheel." And I think there was a natural rebellion against that. I think one of the most effective, it wasn't something that I necessarily agree with, but one of the most powerful campaign ads that the Trump campaign spent millions and millions of dollars making sure that every eyeball in America got to see was the ad where Kamala Harris is in an interview and she's telling the interviewee or the interviewer, I'm going to use taxpayer-funded monies to pay for prisoners in jails to have transition surgery so they can change their gender. And at the end of it, the voice comes on and says, Donald Trump is for you. Kamala Harris is for they, them.
Yes.
And I say that that was a really influential commercial because I've asked my own little focus group individually of friends who are sort of paying attention to politics, but they're not really into it like I am. What was, without me prompting them, what was the most influential ad? And he pointed to that one every single time, like 6 different people I talked to.
I heard Eric Erickson. I'll steal this from Eric Erickson. There was research on that because these guys, when they run a commercial, both sides, all sides do it. They are testing the heck out of that to see if it works. Is that message working? And that message worked. That message resonated.
Yeah. And it's not like she could deny it. It was her own words.
Right.
And this was the problem with Kamala Harris. She'd never gone through a primary.
Yep.
Or when she did go through a primary, she said stuff like that and she got booted out of the debate very rapidly. She was one of the first to drop out.
Yeah.
When she was running for the nomination against Biden in 20. And those instances where you were able to take the candidate speaking in their own words, there's only so many ways you can say, well, I don't mean that anymore.
Right.
Right. And it's like to compare and contrast like J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance, when he was named to the ticket, the Democrats threw up all of his former statements about Donald Trump being unfit for office.
Sure.
Well, I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, where J.D. Vance is a U.S. senator. Today, he's a U.S. senator. And they had billboards all around Cincinnati. And it was a picture of J.D. Vance with a big quote on it saying, Donald Trump's unfit for office. J.D. Vance. Right? I mean, those were the billboards in Ohio. So, but the story of, listen, I was proven wrong. And I have come around. My position isn't that Donald Trump is unfit for office. He's proven me wrong, and now I'm on his team because he's proven me wrong. That's a far more believable thing than just simply ignoring it or trying to say, they're playing dirty pool by using my own words against me.
Yeah, that would have been very helpful if Harris had said, you know what, I used to think that, but yes, because of X, Y, Z, now I think this. But Scott, you mentioned, we've mentioned the Latino vote. A friend sent me this data. 4 years ago, Latino men, Biden had a 23-point lead among Latino men. Trump won them by 10 points this time. That's a 33-point swing, okay? We also need to mention African-American men, right, who Harris only got 58% of African-American, the gap was 58 points. down from 69 points in 2016 for Hillary Clinton. So that those sorts of things, that trend toward Trump is huge. Latino women also. Harris's margin for Latino women was only 24 points compared to 39 for Biden in 2020 and 44 for Hillary Clinton in 2016. So, I mean, I think that why was this margin so big? That's why. That's why.
Yeah, the coalition that Donald Trump was able to put together, several different anchors last night called it a realignment.
Yeah. And
which
it's something that Trump had been criticized for in 2020 of not really doing anything to expand his coalition. Well, he did this time.
Right. And so from Trump's victory speech, I'm going to read a line. It says, but we have the greatest people also. Maybe that's the most important thing. This campaign has been so historic in so many ways. We've built the biggest, the broadest, the most unified coalition. They've never seen anything like it in all of American history. They've never seen any. Young and old men, women, rural and urban. And we had them all helping us tonight. When you think, I mean, I was looking at it, I was watching it. They had some great analysis of the people that voted for us. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. They came from all quarters, union, non-union, African American, Hispanic American, Asian American, Arab American, Muslim American. We had everybody, and it was beautiful. It was a historic realignment, uniting citizens of all backgrounds around a common core of common sense. You know, we're the party of common sense.
Mm-hmm.
So he did strike a bit of a more unifying tone. When Kamala Harris called him, he congratulated her. He gave her kind words. He commended her for her veracity and for her professionalism, which I think set a good tone because, everybody was expecting him to be like, oh, yeah, give me all the praise. Give me all that's what they were expecting. Like every pundit in America was thinking he's just going to be cold hearted to her.
And that, and he wasn't. That version of Trump might return, but it's not here right now.
No, winning cheers a lot of things.
Yes. You're a lot happier.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, I mean, when you're on a losing streak, even if it's just one, it can be hard for competitive people.
So Scott, something that really jumped out at me about the numbers last night. Trump won the popular vote.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. But I pulled up the numbers from 2020. Trump in 2020 received 74 million votes, 74.2 million votes. That's a heck of a lot of votes. Last night, 72.5 million votes. He almost duplicated his vote total from 4 years ago. Whereas in 2020, Joe Biden received 81.2 million votes, 81.3 million votes. Kamala Harris, 67.7 million votes. So she lost 14 million, almost 14 million votes fewer than Joe Biden received 4 years ago, whereas Trump almost hit his same numbers.
Here's the one thing I think is a total indictment on the media and the Democrats together. Because there were some folks who are like, this is Joe Biden's fault. There's a political article, it's a Joe Biden handicapped or whatever. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. You said this earlier in this podcast. She was asked on The View, which I'm going to get to The View on the other side of another live read, because I watched The View for the first time in my life today. But she was asked while she's on The View, what policy positions would you be different on? And she said, I can't think of any. And that ran as an ad. I mean, they just clipped her own words and started using that as an ad. There's no difference between the two of us. I can't think of any real policy differences. I can't think of a time where we were super discreet. 75% of Americans were either dissatisfied or angry about the current direction of America. And Chris Wallace, before polls closed, was on CNN saying, there's no way Harris gets elected with that type of headwind. And the other panelists were like, oh, no, you're crazy. She's not Joe Biden. She never made that argument. she always said, Joe Biden and I are the same. She never departed from it. She could have very easily said, look, I'm Joe Biden's vice president. I'm a member of the administration. I have supported him on key issues, but I am not Joe Biden. I don't look like him. I don't sound like him. I don't make my decisions like him. And I will do things differently by pivoting to this great policy agenda. But she never had that.
No. And look, I understand she's trying to thread a needle here because Biden is still popular in Democratic circles. But good grief, she has to try to win the election. And if saying that she never had any, if not being able to articulate any disagreement with Biden over the 4 years he was in office, if that's off the table, you are really hampering her campaign. So, yeah, if Biden and his people were demanding total loyalty, then it is Joe Biden's fault. And it's Joe Biden's fault for he should have never announced he was running again in the first place.
Right.
He should have said,
and this is where I get mad at the media because they covered for him.
Absolutely.
And we all saw it. We saw when Obama had to put his arm around him to walk him off stage so he didn't fall down in front of everybody.
Right.
The actor dude, George Clooney, came out afterwards and said he wasn't the same Joe Biden.
Right.
But he said it after the debate. You should have said it weeks or months in advance.
Right.
You guys lied to us. Like the entire Democrat establishment in collusion with the media lied to us about the mental health of the President of the United States. So you still can't convince me Joe Biden's actually doing the duties of the job today.
Yeah.
Right? They should 26th Amendment that dude. They should have done it earlier this year. And Kamala would have been running as an incumbent. But to have the President of the United States so clearly disabled and not functioning at the level where he was when he got elected is all kinds of serious for national security concerns.
Right.
Who's actually making the decisions? They showed last night at 10 o'clock at night, they showed a live shot of the White House, and I elbowed my wife and I said, the lights of the residence are off.
Yeah.
It's 10 o'clock on election night, and he's gone to bed.
Yeah.
Like, there are no lights on in the residence because it's the upper right-hand corner of the White House. That's where the residence is. There wasn't a single light on through the window.
Yeah.
You could actually see everything was dark. What is happening to our President of the United States right now?
Yeah.
And Kamala was part of that. She could have easily fixed that. She could have been a leader in a very critical time in this country, and she chose not to. She failed a very fundamental piece of leadership.
And she was asked, I think, only twice during the twice that I heard of during her brief campaign. When did you notice President Biden slipping? She acted like, what are you talking about? He's not slipping.
Sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
That was the phrase they kept using over and over again. You saw it over and over again.
Yeah.
He's sharp as a tack.
Preposterous.
Yeah. He challenges his staff every day. He quizzes them to make sure they know what's going on.
Yeah.
And he has command of every fact and detail. Like the dude couldn't complete a sentence on stage.
Right.
The line where Trump says, I don't know what he said, and I don't think he understands what he said either.
Yes.
It was over at that point. It was over. Like the race was over at that point. Not for Joe Biden. 107 days. She comes in with 107 days left. He pussyfooted around, trying to convince everybody he was going to be able to beat Donald Trump. There was no way in hell.
Yeah.
Joe Biden would have defeated Donald Trump this year. He would have ate him up. It would have been a far bigger victory for Donald Trump. I also believe this in my heart of hearts, that if we had nominated anybody else, it would have been Reagan-esque.
Yes.
You would have been looking at 2 or 3 states, Minnesota and California, maybe Washington and Oregon.
Yes.
I think you would have had, like a Nikki Haley, because New York voters this year didn't turn out.
Right. And
there was a massive drop off.
What has to be scary for Democrats too, look at New Jersey.
They delayed calling New Jersey immediately upon the polls closed.
Harris won New Jersey by 5 points. New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Let's look at Illinois. 9 points in Illinois. Are you kidding me?
Right.
I mean,
So I'm going to tell you about The View, but first I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Americans for Prosperity. Go on over to americansforprosperity.org. This is a great conservative organization. If you're interested in becoming a warrior in the grassroots and advocating for great policy, you should get plugged in with Americans for Prosperity. Go over to americansforprosperity.org. They have events all the time. They've been busting their butt. They've been knocking on doors for candidates in state house races here. If you want to be part of the conservative movement, AFP is where it's at. Thank you to our friends over at Americans for Prosperity for being a partner level Patreon. Check them out again at americansforprosperity.org. Click out in their Georgia chapter, get plugged in with our friends over there like Tony West. If you too would like to be a partner, well, a Patreon, you don't have to be a partner level, just $5 a month, completely voluntary. Head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit, sign up today. So I woke up this morning and immediately set my DVR to record ABC at 11 a.m. That's when The View comes on. It's the very first time I've ever watched The View. Have you ever
one
watched
more
The
time
View?
than I have. Obviously,
You've never
I've seen
watched it?
I've seen clips, obviously, but
I think I might have watched it when it first came on. I think I was in high school, and Barbara Walters was starting it, and I was a big political nerd, so I wanted to see. I might have watched it like 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But here we are. It's the day after, and I got to say, they initially struck a very conciliatory tone.
Mm-hmm.
Look, we're not happy, but it's the election, and unlike Donald, they took a shot at Donald Trump. Unlike Donald Trump, we're gonna say it wasn't the system, it wasn't rigged. The American people have spoken. Joy Behar said, I vehemently disagree with the rest of the American people who voted for him, but I accept the outcome of the election.
Mm-hmm.
There was one of the panelists, I don't know all their names. The
Right.
only two I know are Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar.
Yeah.
But one of the panelists was like, this was about sexism and it was about racism. And she immediately went there.
Yeah.
And we just had this, it's not like she didn't have the benefit of hearing Donald Trump's victory speech and the line that I just read about how all the different people joined the coalition and how unifying he was. But they genuinely have a fear of the man that he's going to be a dictator because they bring up, Pi brought this up last week when you weren't here about how Donald Trump and the Supreme Court ruling saying he's not subject to prosecution. It's like, that's not technically, they were repeating that rhetoric too. And it's not technically accurate. There's still a case by Jack Smith, who I expect to be fired 12/10 on January 20th, 2025.
Well, yeah, I saw a headline that I won't. I saw a headline that indicated he's winding it down now. Under instructions from Garland and the Department of Justice. But I
wonder if that
I haven't
came
had a chance
down
to
from on high.
fact check that. So
yeah. Well, I mean, he refiled it, right? I mean, he basically brought it back, and he narrowly tailored it to the Supreme Court's ruling, because what the Supreme Court ruled was, president acting in their official capacity has sovereign immunity, means you can't sue him, you can't bring charges against him because it's an official act.
Right.
But if he's acting in his own interest or his outside of the duties of his office, then those are actions that are prosecutable.
Right.
And it created a new legal standard. And so that was going forward. Maybe it won't anymore. I see that Bill Barr has called for all the prosecutions that are outstanding to be ended.
Yeah.
And former Attorney General Barr has not been friendly to the Trump camp.
Right.
But him going out there and saying, look, it's for the good of the country, just go ahead and end these things.
Yeah. I think Fonnie Willis's case is probably already dead anyway.
Right.
The question then is what happens in New York with I guess we've got the two cases going that are being appealed there, right? They're
being appealed, but he's set to be sentenced on November 26th.
Right.
Now, here's the thing with Alvin Bragg. And of all the people who made this point last night on News Nation, it was Chris Cuomo who made this point. Alvin Bragg is not known in New York for taking misdemeanors and elevating them to felonies and dumping the harshest penalties on a first-time offender.
Right.
He's known for the opposite of that. he's known for taking felony offenses and dropping them to misdemeanors and giving the lightest possible penalty.
Yeah.
So it will look completely political. Like it's looked political from the get-go.
Right.
Like, taking old misdemeanors where the statute of limitations had run and elevating them to felonies, that had never been done before. So it looked super sketchy, super political, super targeted. You can't convince me that the defendant was not named Donald Trump, that prosecution would not have happened.
Right.
Which, I'm the guy who says, let's defend our institutions all the time.
Right.
It's hard to defend that, though. Like, you can't defend that. It's indefensible when you break from everything that you're known for. I mean, when Chris Cuomo is the one pointing out,
yes,
Alvin Bragg's not known for elevating misdemeanors to felonies. He's known for doing the opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, and I got to say this for Chris Cuomo, too. I don't know what's happened to him since he left CNN, because when he was at CNN, he was in the bag for everything the Democrats said. He was a regurgitator of Democratic talking points constantly.
Right.
And what I noticed about him and his coverage last night is he went after both sides equally.
Yeah.
Which I think is what everybody should be doing. We shouldn't be like just dismissing our own tribe. We should see the flaws in our own tribe and call them out when we see the flaws to prevent them from festering. But that's what he was doing. And he did it consistently throughout the night in his coverage.
That's good.
Kamala Harris did this wrong. She did this really well. She did this really bad. Donald Trump did this really good. He did this really bad. And that was refreshing. I couldn't believe it was the same Chris Cuomo. Like, that's the same guy. It was right. It was an interesting departure from what I had known him as the guy over at CNN. But at the end of the day, we have a president who has been convicted. He has several different charges outstanding. We don't know how those are going to look or how it's going to play out. At this point, is it smart to just let him go?
Huh. Well, I think he's kind of, through various things, kind of defeated them. Defeated almost all of them, except for the classified records case, which maybe now that goes away since he's back in the White House. Since he's headed back to the White House, maybe that goes away too. And then, those ones in New York, which as you just mentioned, I think Bragg's was the most ridiculous one. I also think the case against him about the exaggerating the value of his properties in order to get a loan, that's kind of ridiculous too, because
paid those back.
Yeah, they didn't. The banks, nobody who was harmed in those things. So I think I think he may win on appeal in both of those things, or or at least get the civil penalty he's forced to pay, which in the loan case, it's like something on the order of $500 million or something. That may come way down where it's something manageable, and then it goes away. But it doesn't involve any jail time either way, right?
Right.
So I think they're all going to go away, and with Republicans, looks like Republicans are going to hold the House by the narrowest of the U.S. Congress by the narrowest of margins. So
we'll talk about that next.
He's not in jeopardy of being impeached again.
The congressional switch. We'll talk about the Senate, and we'll talk about Georgia legislative races on the other side of the ALZ library.
Yep. All right. Our anonymous supporter of Peach Bun at the Podcast wants you to go support the Alzheimer's Association of America. You can find them at alz.org, alz.org. And if you go right now, you will see that they have a triple match challenge. Your gift will go 3 times as far, up to a maximum of $650,000. That's to help advance research and provide care and support for millions of people affected by Alzheimer's. So please do that. Please go to alz.org. I know it's getting close to the end of the year. Folks are looking for ways to increase their charitable giving. Well, here's one you should consider: the Alzheimer's Association of America. So please go and support that great organization. And we thank our anonymous supporter for supporting Peach Pundit, the podcast.
So did you donate $1 to Ted Cruz?
I did not, and I was feeling
Rhino.
I was feeling kind of guilty about it, and I talked to a guy I know, a colleague who works for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I said, hey, we were texting back and forth on election day, what's going to happen, and he said, well, Trump wins by double digits. He wasn't worried that Cruz would lose. He thought it would be closer. He thought Trump would significantly outperform Cruz. And so I said, oh, man, maybe I should have sent that $1 over when he texted me. And I thought it was a hilarious line. I sent it to you guys. I thought it was a hilarious line. He said, you had the chance to bend the arc of history, but you chose to stand on the sidelines. So shameful.
Ted Cruz won by over 1 million votes.
Yeah.
Well, almost 1 million votes. It was 9-point win.
He didn't need my $1. So
yeah, he didn't need your $1. And I like Ted Cruz. Among our friend group, I'm probably one of the few who actually does like Ted Cruz.
I don't know that many people in Texas, they vote for him, but I don't know that many people in Texas like Ted Cruz.
Right.
From what I hear.
I had this interaction with Ted Cruz in 2016. I was in the Republican for Leadership Georgia class.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the street corner. We were waiting to go in for dinner with our group. We were at the Capitol Grill in downtown D.C. And Ted Cruz came walking down the sidewalk. He was going in for dinner too. And he sees a group and he's like, hey, where y'all from? It's like, oh, we're from Georgia. And I'm talking to him. And, I had that Goose lapel pin that I wore while I was in the legislature. And that pen has it was a significant statement about my own faith. And it gave me the opportunity to share my faith with people, because whenever they would ask about it, I would share with them what the meaning was. I won't bore you all with it. But as I'm telling him the story, he's locked eyes with me and I'm explaining the significance of it. And he is locked in. Like, there is no other person on the face of the planet. And this guy starts yelling, hey, Ted, 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 Ted. And he looks at me and he says, I'm so sorry. He apologizes for this guy interrupting us. And he turns around and it's Charlie Crist trying to get Ted Cruz's attention while we're talking. But it was that moment of, look, I'm going to ignore that guy as best I can because I'm really interested in what you're telling me.
Right.
And and it was Charlie Crist getting his attention. It was like, okay, that was something you don't see Ted Cruz portrayed as in the media, but it's a skill that I've tried to emulate, because it's really easy when you're in a crowded room and you're an elected official where people try to grab your attention. And it's really rude to the person that you're in front of to divert your attention away. And I learned in that moment, that is something I need to emulate. Yeah. And that one thing, if anything I've tried, I have failed dozens of times. And if you're one of those people I was rude to by doing that, I really genuinely apologize. I wanted to be like that. And so I like Ted Cruz. And I've gotten to talk to him a couple of times over the years. And he came to Holly Springs to stump for David Perdue. Mm-hmm. And I was part of the host group that brought him in, him and Nathan Deal, at the same time with me and Mandy Ballinger. Yeah. We were all in a group photo together with Bruce Thompson. And it's one of my favorite group photos because it's like all the different factions of the Republican Party are represented in this one picture. So Ted Cruz wins by over 1 million, but Republicans had a really good night. They flipped so far. They flipped 3 seats, starting with the gangster of the night. Bernie Moreno in Ohio took down Sherrod Brown.
Longtime incumbent,
populist, popular with the union crowd. Mm-hmm. Bernie Moreno, if you're not familiar with Bernie Moreno, the Democrats in the Ohio primary for Senate handpicked Bernie Moreno to be the opponent for Senator Brown because they thought he was the craziest MAGA person they could find. And so they dumped a ton of money in that primary, the Democrats supporting Bernie Moreno in the primary. And during his victory speech last night, Bernie Moreno gave Chuck Schumer a shout out. Thank you to Leader Schumer for the support during the primary. And by the way, you're fired. I thought it was a gangster move.
Yes.
Da 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 da.
Right.
John Tester, we knew was going down. He lost by almost, looks like 12 points.
Yep.
And obviously West Virginia went Republican, which,
Right.
and
I think another shocker is that, that people weren't necessarily expecting is, at the moment, Dave McCormick, the Republican, is up by 28,000 votes, 27,000 votes over the incumbent Democrat Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. That's with 95% of the votes reported. So that had, Decision Desk hasn't called it, but that might be a pickup there. And then the other really close one is kind of a surprise is Sam Brown. I got a gazillion texts from him too, wanting money. Sam, it looks like he put it to good use. He's got a 4,000 vote lead over Jackie Rosen, the incumbent Democrat in the Nevada Senate. So that, at the moment, Republicans have 52, so they will have the majority. Could be up to 54. And it looks like, once again, the election was stolen from Kari Lake in Arizona. So, that's
I will say this.
She trails by 60,000 votes.
If Georgia had ranked choice voting, that majority in the Senate would be 56. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If we used ranked choice voting instead of runoffs, we would have 56 U.S. senators, not 54, which is important because the filibuster isn't going anywhere. I don't see it going anywhere. I think they'll do away with it for judicial appointments, and that's probably it. I mean, they've already done that.
Right.
But it was a good night for the U.S. Senate. In the House, it's still a pretty close race whether or not the Republicans are going to take the House.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 52% chance at this point.
Well, looking at, once again, actually Decision Desk with their rolling percentage, they give Republicans an 88.7% chance to grab
it's gone up.
Yeah, so they're at the moment of called races, they're sitting at 210, Democrats with 195. That represents two pickups for the Republicans.
A net two pickups.
Net two, yeah.
Their projection, flipped 6, Democrats have flipped 2, according to CNN. I don't see the Decision Desk on my screen, but
yeah, their projection is the Republicans will end up with 221. But that's gone down. When we started, I was looking at it and it had them at 222. So that's gone down one. So they're at 221 right now, right? Is it 222? That's about the same number that they have right now, right?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, it's about the same. So both chambers of Congress and the White House.
That's pretty stunning.
I'm looking for the repeal of Obamacare in week 1.
Well, this is something that's interesting because, what should they do? Yes, it was a resounding victory, but I think, as we were saying earlier, Scott, I tend to think it's more of a rejection of the Democratic Party than it is a rubber stamp for everything MAGA wants to do. So,
but MAGA doesn't want to get rid of Obamacare. That's the point.
No, that's
right?
true.
What great conservative look! If you're going, don't waste this opportunity. Yeah, don't waste this opportunity. Don't waste it. Don't waste it. You're probably only going to have it till the midterms, right? Some of y'all Congress critters up there who stick your finger in the wind. You just got to realize you're there for 2 years only.
Right.
Treat these as if they're your last 2 years. You're going to get something done.
Right.
Go do stuff. Don't sit back and just wait for those 2 years to run out the clock so you can try to get reelected again to do absolutely freaking nothing.
Right.
Because the midterms are going to be brutal. We know that. There are going to be a whole bunch of people who are going to lose. Your colleagues are going to lose, or you're going to lose. Just treat it like the days are numbered and the end of days are coming for you, and go maximize your time in that role. Otherwise, we've wasted this opportunity. Obamacare should be on the table. We should be looking at ways to fix the healthcare system in this country.
Yes.
And Obamacare is not delivered on the promises. It has not cut costs. It's a massive amount of my budget comes out from our healthcare premiums as well as our deductible. It's outrageous how much money we are spending in this country on that program. We need to wholesale overhaul, like make it
Right.
happen, make
Yep.
it happen. Let's return some free market principles into the healthcare market. Go do the thing that J.D. Vance was talking about with high risk pools.
Yeah.
Do something big with this time. Don't just
Right.
sit back and waste it. I will.
Yeah.
I-
No, you're right. But I think they gotta do things that they can't go full crazy MAGA and say, all right, we're going to launch investigations into the Biden crime family and blah blah blah, all this kind of stuff. Don't do that stuff. Do stuff like Scott was talking about. Do things about the economy to help boost the economy and to advance innovation and those sorts of things. Please don't do what Robert F. Kennedy said was going to happen, which is we're going to block fluoride from the water. Don't do that stuff.
Don't put Herschel Walker in charge of anything.
Yes.
Don't put RFK in charge of anything.
Right.
And honestly, I know I'm going against zeitgeist here. Don't put Elon Musk in charge of anything.
No.
Just let him
give
go.
him a free hand. Say, hey, you are free to go pursue your greatness in the private sector, which he's already doing. We're going to knock down regulatory roadblocks and let you go do what you want to do.
Yeah. So turning our attention to back home here in Georgia, we did have some minor shifts in the state legislature, and one race has an incumbent leading by a very tight margin.
Mm-hmm.
But Representatives Ken Vance, a Republican from House District 149, Misha Maynor, who had famously swapped parties over the school choice issue in District 56, which is in Atlanta. Farouk Mughal, isn't that your district, 105?
That is I was drawn into that district with the adjusted redistricting. So, yeah.
All three of them lost to their challengers. That represents a net pickup of 2 for the Democrats in the House. The Mac Jackson is currently leading by 47 votes over Republican challenger Tracy Wheeler.
Yeah.
If that should hold, that would mean that Republicans will lose 2 seats. The new majority will be 100 Republicans to 80 Democrats in the Georgia State House.
Yeah.
The Senate had no incumbent losses. So that means the majority in the Senate remains at 33 Republicans to 23 Democrats.
Yeah. All incumbents on the right and the left will run one re-election in Congress.
Yes.
Brian Jack, of course, is the newbie.
Right. But that was a Republican hold.
Yes.
And so how do you think the House governs any differently with a slightly slimmer margin?
No, because they were all pretty. I think Speaker Burns has done a pretty good job of unifying the caucus behind him. There's not really any. Well, your state rep maybe might raise a ruckus, but she's all alone.
So interesting. You're talking about Charlize Byrd,
yes,
State Representative Byrd. She in my precinct. I live in a precinct called Liberty. I'm not making that up. In the Liberty precinct, she got nearly 1,000 more votes than Donald Trump.
Wow.
And I was going to go look at all the precincts in Cherokee County to see what the difference what the delta would be.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a pattern that holds. I looked at 2 precincts that she has. One is Bridge Mill, large neighborhood in the 20th House District. And she beat him in there by over 500 votes.
Mm-hmm.
So with just 2 precincts that I looked at, she had 1,500 more votes than Donald Trump did in just those 2 precincts. I think she ended up with 28,000 plus votes. But that's a phenomenon that has repeated itself since the beginning. And it has nothing to do with Dominion voting machines, because back in 2016, when I was on the same ballot as Donald Trump in the 21st House District, because it was the 21st at the time, I got more votes than Donald Trump.
Right.
In every single precinct.
Yep.
And it wasn't close. It was several thousand votes.
Yeah.
And so I went and looked at every member of the Cherokee delegation, and it was true. Every member of the Cherokee County delegation, Brandon Beach, Bruce Thompson, John Albers, me, Michael Caldwell, Wes Cantrell.
I think it was pretty much true of every state. May not be every precinct, but every state rep, incumbent at least.
So
Republican state rep incumbent.
I chalk that up to a lot of the soccer moms just wanting to vote down ballot for Republicans, but not for the guy at the top of the ticket.
Yeah,
but it's a weird phenomenon to see down ballot Republicans outperforming the top of the ticket.
No doubt, and it should cause some humility among MAGA, but
hey,
we'll see.
In the eyes of the Alabama cheerleader, every Republican got elected on the coattails of Donald Trump.
Yes.
I did notice one little thing, though. I went and looked at Governor Kemp's. I didn't look at his personal account. I looked at his official account. There's nothing official about election results on his official account. So just pointing that out.
Let me see. I saw something a few minutes ago. I retweeted something. Let me look at that. It's it's his official account, Brian Kemp. But Brian Kemp GA, that's the campaign.
That's the campaign.
Congratulations to President-elect Donald Trump. We look forward to working together to put hardworking Americans first and get our country back on track.
That's his personal account.
6 hours ago.
Yep. One other person tweeted out a congratulatory note to the president-elect, and I thought it was worth mentioning because his name is Jeff Duncan.
Right.
Congratulations, President Trump, on your decisive victory. You earned it the hard way. Hopeful this country gets back to working together.
Okay.
He posted that early this morning.
Yeah.
Now, Jeff was in New York. He had tweeted last night a picture of the New York skyline talking about how he was going to head over to CNN for election night coverage, but I didn't see him.
No, I didn't watch all night. Our church had a prayer meeting, which I thought was appropriate to attend. Big crowd there praying for our country while we didn't know the results at the time. But I watched CNN for a while, and I didn't see Jeff either, and that doesn't mean that he wasn't on there at some point in time.
So I did notice one other thing, though. I don't see the MAGA world going crazy about this election was run fraudulently or there are problems everywhere.
Yeah, that's... Oh, I did see, I saw a tweet from Chairman McCoon, and while you and a lady, he was thanking various organizations for their hard work. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah. I said this last night, but it bears repeating. The extraordinary young people that staff Trump Force 47, blah, 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 Turning Point Action, Greater Georgia, Faith and Freedom, Tea Party Patriots. They did a wonderful ground game, and somebody immediately pointed out, how about Governor Kemp? And he said, "Oh, I'm grateful for the work of Governor Kemp," and he said he thanked him last night in public, so that's good. But one of the replies really kind of cracked me up. Let's see if I can find it, because I want to quote a person. Looks like a lady. It's a picture of a lady named Rusty Cannon, who big MAGA person, has 7,000 followers. I can't wait to dig into the election fraud in Georgia and keep exposing it. No way Kamala got 2.5 million votes in Georgia. And why the mainstream media waited so long to call it. We must be vigilant. Get rid of those cheating machines. The work is just beginning. We're coming for the cheaters.
Good Lord.
So
you can't even take your win.
The fight goes on, Scott.
Well,
the fight goes on. But no, you're right. It hasn't. The loudest voices aren't talking about the election being stolen today.
But grifters have got to have a reason to grift.
Right.
And if they point to 2.5 million Georgians as the reason why they have to grift, they're going to grift. They got to have a grift. The grifters got to grift.
Yes.
So they can't give away the cow that keeps on delivering the milk.
Right.
Yeah,
But look, on the bigger picture, right? I hope that this that MAGA can finally move on and say, all right, and because they got to govern. They grabbed the golden ring. They run everything in the Republican world now, and now it's time to govern. So
just one last story I want to talk
can
about
they do it?
before we wrap up, and that was there was a thing that happened on Friday night, and there was a statement made by the Georgia Republican Party that it got my wheels spinning late Friday. I didn't do a whole lot about it Friday night because I wasn't going to start calling. It was late by the time I became aware of what was happening. But the folks over at the Fulton County Election Office decided they were going to open over the weekend to accept absentee ballots in person from people who wanted to walk in and hand them over the counter.
Right.
Right.
A legal way to make sure your absentee ballot gets counted. Right.
Right. And so the statement comes out for immediate release on November 1st. Fulton County plans to illegally accept ballots. Officials blatantly disregard state law by accepting ballots after the deadline. Atlanta, it has come to our attention that Fulton County election officials are planning to open 4 election offices this weekend to accommodate voters seeking to hand return their absentee ballots. This is a blatant violation of Georgia law, subsection D of Code Section 12-2-385, OCGA 21-2-382, which states all drop boxes shall be closed when the advance voting period ends. This must be stopped immediately, and those willfully breaking Georgia law should be held accountable. To make matters worse, the 4 election office locations are situated in areas of the county that will clearly favor Democratic candidates. We are calling on state officials to take immediate action and stop this and maintain confidence in Georgia's election integrity. Fulton County's patently illegal acts give us no choice but to file suit immediately. Listen, like I read that and I thought, well, if they are opening their drop boxes, because I went and checked the code, they're right.
Right.
So I reached out to some folks on Saturday. I spent too much of my Saturday on this issue. Too much.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't make a big deal out of it because I don't go seeking media attention when I go to work.
Right.
I don't look for the nearest camera. I don't look for the nearest microphone. I don't sit down at my keyboard and start writing an article for Peach Pundit. In my official role in my day job, I start placing calls to see what the heck's going on. And when I reached out to my sources, they said, yeah, they're taking it to court, but it's not about drop boxes. Okay, well, what's it about then? It's about whether or not people can hand their ballot in. I was like, well, there's nothing in the code about them handing their ballot in. Well, that's what Josh McCoon is telling people. Josh McCoon's telling people they're leaving the drop boxes open, and it's not about the drop boxes at all.
Right.
So, okay, I'm really glad I didn't just overreact and start pounding on my keyboard the moment I saw what Josh wrote. And this is where we are now with the Republican Party, at least my relationship with them. I have to verify everything they say because I don't know if it's true or not. I know they've said several things that aren't true about me, like I sued them. I didn't sue them. I sued the state of Georgia. They got involved. You know, they decided to become defendants. They intervened in that case. I did not name them as a defendant, but they're more than happy to go tell everybody I sued them. So I know they say things that are not true. I know that at this point that they do. So I have to verify this. And when I go to verify it, it took me a half an hour of phone calls and conversations with people to realize it's not about drop boxes at all.
Right.
You know, and the Republican Party got Bill Belichick on this. You know, because, Bill Belichick would read the rule book and then he would apply the rules in the middle of a game.
Right.
And everybody would get upset because they'd never been applied that way. And nobody else understood him to mean what he thought it was. And he'd go to the rest and be like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to commit a dead ball foul while the clock is running. And that's going to cause more clock to run off. And I'll just keep committing all these dead ball penalties until the clock is gone. Right. And I'm in the lead. I don't have to give the ball up to the other team. And it pissed everybody off. They're like, oh my gosh, right? But Bill Belichick outcoached and outplayed the other team.
Right.
And in this particular case, these Democratic counties that opened up, and here's the other thing too. He made this about Fulton, but Walton County opened up, a Republican stronghold. Lowndes County opened up to do this. This was not something that hasn't happened in the past. apparently this happens every election cycle where they're in there verifying absentee ballots anyway over the weekend because they have a stack of them to process or pre-process.
Right.
And since they're there anyway and people are walking in, yeah, you can give me your ballot. That shouldn't have been a scandal.
Right.
But he made it about drop boxes. And what it really became for me, two things. One, you got outplayed. Congratulations. And I wrote this article in response to him and I wasn't going to publish it. I wrote it on Saturday and I sat on it. And then by Sunday night, he was calling me out. Yeah. Oh, that principled group over there hasn't said a single word and their silence is deafening. That's what he said.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, here you go.
Not anymore.
It doesn't make you look good, but here's what I have to say about it.
Well, it reminds me of when a couple of counties first said, "Oh, we're gonna have advanced in-person voting on Sunday too," and the code was vague on it, so they weren't in violation of the code, and that's when we the bill was passed to specify when there could be weekends opened, and it increased the early voting, the advanced in-person voting days a couple of years ago, right? But I remember that first week, everybody was freaking out, and my elections chief at the time sent me. I said, "Hey," so she emailed me and said, "Hey, here's how many people voted early compared to the previous election," and really all that happened was the people who would have voted the Saturday and Sunday voting was actually the same as the Saturday voting the year before. Right. It just people went on Sunday instead of Saturday. So, and I imagine, if you looked at it, we talked about the turnout, the turnout in Georgia exceeded, there were more votes cast in 2024 than there were in 2020, but we have a lot more registered voters now. So I imagine overall turnout is down a little bit, but it ends up being much ado about nothing. And again, all right, fine. Go if this really upsets you, go pass a bill next January saying you can't do this.
Well, they want to get rid of drop boxes altogether. So, I mean, that's neither here nor there. But the biggest, most egregious thing that happened, because Fulton County did make some really stupid decisions.
Yes.
And the biggest stupid decision is they had a election official over there sent out an email to the people working Saturday. FYI, there are no watchers approved for ballot drop-off. Don't let them in the building. If they want to observe from the parking lot, you can't stop them, but they will not be allowed to sit in the building. Have your security detail enforce it.
Yeah.
And I was made aware of that by my sources that I contacted on Saturday about the Dropbox issue, and they're like, well, they're not letting people in. I became aware at that point.
Totally wrong. Right.
Yeah. The Secretary of State was sending over their own staff because they couldn't refuse Secretary of State staff. They really couldn't refuse Republican observers. And I asked, why won't they let them in? They say they're afraid of the Republican observers. Okay.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
When the Republican Party falsely said that I was suing them, and Josh McCoon started referring to me as a Republican in quotes as opposed to just a Republican, I got a lot of vitriolic response. And I know if those election officials probably, if they got anything similar to me, I could see why they would feel that way. But these people are going to be statutorily required to watch everything you do for the next week anyway.
Right.
So just let them in. And you said in the same email, you have a security detail. All you're doing is pouring gasoline on this stolen election crowd. And it's already a bonfire. And you're just setting it ablaze 20 stories high as opposed to 10 stories high. Good job. Like, just foolish decision on their part.
Yeah, that was dumb. Because you're just going to have one person sitting there, one Republican sitting there watching people, wander in. I mean, good grief, how dangerous is that?
Not at all. Not at all. Especially since you have a security detail that's capable of keeping them in the parking lot as opposed to allowing them in the building.
Right.
Like you just mentioned security. Anyway. Dumb. Stupid.
Yes.
They shouldn't have done it. They were foolish for doing that. Again, if there had been a tight margin, This would have been one of those things.
Yes, another thing that folks would have complained about. It would have fueled 1,000 conspiracy theories.
Yep, absolutely would have. But I think that's all the time we really have. We went way over.
Yeah, I think
But there was a lot
covered
to talk
every aspect of this election, so that needs to be covered.
Overall, I'm feeling good. You know,
Yeah.
I the night before I had an existential dread type feeling. I felt like whatever the opposite of Christmas Eve was is what it was the night before. But I'm feeling good. I don't think Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. I think he will want to be loved by historians. He will want to be mentioned in the same sentence as George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. And I think he will attempt to govern that way. I think this talk about him seeking retribution and all that stuff, I think that will fall on the wayside once he gets into the job.
Yeah.
One reporter who's been with him since he started his first campaign told me that he has degraded physically.
Yeah.
And that he is not as sharp mentally when you speak to him one-to-one.
Well, that's kind of evident on the campaign trail, not to the extent of President Biden, but
right. But it's worth bearing witness to, or keeping an eye on. And but with that, I'm going to just wrap it up and thank our people who rock. These are the people who voluntarily reach into their pocket every month and throw us a couple pennies to keep us running. They are Bill Werkheiser, Tony West, Americans for Prosperity, Ari Schaefer, Benjamin Hurst, Bo Brandon, Colin Martin, Jeff Cobble, Hank Burnham, James Hall, John Vestal, Mike Buchert, Reed Powell, Robert Lee at Lee6 Media, Ron Daniels, Ryan Purvis, Sam Thomas, Shannon Ferguson, Stuart Wilkinson, and our anonymous contributor. If you don't want your name to be said, we'll make you anonymous too. Maybe we'll just start referring to you as anonymous too. And Mike, if you're listening, I'm still waiting for you to sign up. Thank you for listening to Peach Pundit, the podcast. I am Scott Turner. This has been Buzz Brockway. We are also Jason Pye most of the time. All the music you hear is original by Jason Pye. Peach Pundit is owned, published, and edited by me, Scott Turner. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.